The economic and industrial evolution. The four fundamental changes that fuel the U.S. economy for multiplying. Millions of Americans moved from farms to towns and cities. The number of Americans who worked in factories grew to about 20% of the labor force by 1860. The shift from water power to steam as a source of energy and the rise in agricultural productivity. The cast iron plow was used since 1820, and it proved too weak for the dense soil. The smooth steel plow was patented by John Deere in 1837. Farmers called it the singing plow, and John Deere became a leading manufacturer in the Midwest.
ABE's 7th Historic Landmark commemorates the first successful self-scouring steel plow. John Deere was a pioneer, inventor, and entrepreneur who single-handedly revolutionized American agriculture by developing and marketing the world's first self-polishing cast steel plow. Deere was born in Vermont in 1804 and grew up to work as a blacksmith's apprentice. By 1825, he was famous for the literal and figurative polish of his farm equipment. But in 1836, when Vermont's economy began to suffer, he decided to move to the Midwest. Only 2 days after arriving in Grand Detour, Illinois, Deere had built a forge and was in business. Deere quickly learned that the cast iron plows they brought with them from the east were unable to cope with the thicker, tackier soil of the Midwest. Farmers had to stop every few feet to scrape off the damp earth that clung to the plowshare. With some help from a fellow Vermonter, Major Leonard Andrus, Deere invented a remedy. He shaped steel from an old sawmill blade for the plowshare and joined it to a specially curved wrought iron mold board. He polished both parts so smooth that the damp soil would not stick to them. Demonstrations to local farmers convinced him the plow would turn the prairie soil. Deere's self-polishing plow, later patented, was a sensation from its first trial run in 1837.
Okay. In 1850, most farmers harvested wheat by hand, only cutting 2 to 3 acres a day with hard labor. Improvements in wheat harvesting multiplied farmers' productivity. McCormick Reaper allowed farmers to harvest 12 acres a day. The cost was $100 to $150, and that was cheap back then, so $80,000 reapers were purchased by 1860. Federal land policy made that agricultural productivity possible, which fueled the nation's economy. Up to 1860, the United States continued to be land-rich and labor-poor. Land was sold for $1.25 an acre or $50 for a 40-acre farm that could support a family. Mechanization was meant to produce as if by machine. Mechanization allowed for manufacturers to produce more with less labor. The American system meant manufacturing and then assembling interchangeable parts, and the machine tool industry made parts for machinery. New England led the nation in manufacturing by shipping guns, clocks, plows, and axes west. Western states sent wheat, pork, whiskey, tobacco, and cotton north and east. Manufacturers specialized in producing for the gigantic domestic market rather than for export. Railroads. Locomotives averaged over 20 miles per hour in the 1850s. Trains steamed along 9,000 miles of track, and 2/3 was in New England and the Middle Atlantic states. By 1860, several railroads connected the frontier farmers to 30,000 miles of track spanning from the Mississippi. Railroads propelled the growth of other industries such as iron and communications. Iron production grew up to 5 times faster than the population during the decades leading up to 1860. Great demand for rails, wheels, axles, locomotives, and sturdy iron bridges grew. Other forms of transportation still remain significant. Samuel F.B. Morse patented the telegraph in 1840. Morse's system depended on a code he devised that represented dots and dashes. Messages were sent by a series of taps on the telegraph key. The telegraph wires often ran parallel to the railroad lines.